What happens when one of the most talked about women in the world sits down with one of television's most outspoken hosts and things go completely off the rails? We're about to find out. Because Meghan Markle's appearance on The View just became the most explosive interview of the year. Before we get into this absolute chaos, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me whose side you're on in this whole thing. Because trust me, you're going to have opinions. The View's studio audience was packed. The energy was electric, and Meghan walked onto that stage with the kind of confidence that only comes from surviving years of international scrutiny. The applause was thunderous as she took her seat at the table, settling in between Whoopi Goldberg and Sarah Haynes. Joy Behar sat at the far end, and if you were watching closely, you could see something in her expression, a kind of sharpness that suggested this wasn't going to be your typical celebrity chat. Whoopi opened with the pleasantries, welcoming Meghan and talking about her latest philanthropic project, a global initiative focused on women's education and economic empowerment. Meghan was articulate, passionate, describing the women she'd met around the world and the barriers they faced. The conversation flowed smoothly for the first few minutes. Sarah asked about balancing motherhood with activism, and Meghan gave a thoughtful response about making choices that aligned with her values. Then Joy leaned forward. "So, Meghan," Joy began, her tone casual but with an edge that cut through the pleasantness. "You've talked a lot about privacy over the years, about wanting to protect your family from media intrusion. But you've also done interviews, documentaries, podcasts. Some people might say you can't have it both ways. What do you say to those people?" The studio went quiet. You could feel the shift in energy. Meghan's smile didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened. "Well, Joy," Meghan replied, her voice steady, "I think there's a fundamental difference between choosing to share your own story on your own terms and having your story stolen, twisted, and sold by people who've never met you. I'm not asking for privacy from the world. I'm asking for the same dignity and autonomy that anyone else would want." Joy nodded, but it was clear she wasn't satisfied. Sure. But you have to admit, you've profited from sharing that story. The deals, the book, the streaming projects. It's lucrative, isn't it?" Meghan's expression remained composed, but you could see the tension in her jaw. "Is that a question or an accusation, Joy?" "I'm just saying," Joy continued, leaning back in her chair with a slight shrug. "There are people who've gone through difficult situations who don't have the platform or resources you have. They suffer in silence. You have a megaphone and you're using it, which is your right, but then you also want sympathy for the attention that comes with it. It feels, I don't know, contradictory." Whoopi interjected quickly. "I think what Joy is trying to say is..." But Meghan raised a hand gently, politely, stopping Whoopi. "No, it's okay. I want to address this directly." She turned to face Joy completely, her posture open but firm. "Joy, you've been in the public eye for decades. You've shared your opinions, your experiences, your personal life with millions of people. Have you ever felt like you were asking for too much, when you wanted people to respect your boundaries? When you didn't want cameras following you to dinner, or reporters digging through your trash?" Joy's eyebrows raised. "I'm a comedian and a talk show host. It comes with the territory." "Exactly," Meghan said, her voice gaining strength. "It comes with the territory of the job you chose. But what if the territory kept expanding without your consent? What if your family, your children, became targets not because of anything they did, but because of who you are? Would you still say it just comes with the territory, or would you fight back?" Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Meghan wasn't finished. "You mentioned profit," Meghan continued, her tone measured but unflinching. "Let's talk about that. Every single project I've worked on has been about telling stories that matter, amplifying voices that don't get heard, creating opportunities for underrepresented communities. Yes, I've been compensated for my work, just like you're compensated for yours. But I've also donated millions to charity, funded scholarships, supported grassroots organizations. So when you frame it as profiting off pain, you're ignoring the purpose behind it. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Sarah and Sunny Hostin exchanged glances. Whoopi watched the exchange with a mix of concern and fascination. Joy wasn't backing down. Meghan, I respect your charity work. I really do. But you can't deny that your name sells. Your story sells. And there are people who feel like you're playing the victim while simultaneously living a life of incredible privilege. How do you reconcile that? Meghan took a breath, and for a moment, you could see her weighing her words carefully. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, but no less powerful. Joy, I have never, not once, claimed to be the biggest victim in the world. I've never said my struggles are worse than anyone else's. What I have said, consistently, is that pain is pain. Struggle is struggle. Just because someone has resources doesn't mean they don't suffer. Just because someone has a platform doesn't mean they deserve cruelty. And the idea that we should measure someone's right to speak about their experiences based on how much money they have or what kind of house they live in, that's a dangerous path. Joy leaned forward again, her expression skeptical. But you understand why people are skeptical, right? You married into royalty. You had access to everything. And when it got hard, you left. A lot of people don't have that option. You're right, Meghan said, and her directness seemed to catch Joy off guard. A lot of people don't have that option, and that's exactly why I think these conversations matter. Because leaving an abusive situation, leaving a toxic environment, whether you're a duchess or a waitress, takes incredible courage. And we should be supporting people who make that choice, not questioning their motives or their bank account. Abusive is a strong word, Joy shot back. Are you saying the royal family was abusive? Meghan's eyes flashed. I'm saying that any institution or family dynamic that protects its image over the well-being of the people within it, especially when those people are asking for help, has serious problems. And yes, Joy, I'm saying that what I experienced was damaging, deeply damaging. You can call it whatever word you want, but I know what I lived through. Whoopi tried to step in again. I think we should. No, Whoopi, let her finish, Joy said. Her eyes locked on Meghan. I want to hear this. Meghan straightened in her seat. You want to hear it? Fine. I was told that I couldn't seek help for my mental health because it wouldn't be good for the institution. I was told that my son wouldn't receive security or a title because of concerns about how dark his skin might be. I watched stories be planted about me, lies be spread, and when I tried to defend myself, I was told I was being difficult. So yes, Joy, I left. Because I chose my family's safety and my own sanity over a system that saw me as a problem to be managed rather than a person to be protected. The audience gasped. Some people applauded. Joy sat back, processing. Those are serious allegations, Joy said finally. They're not allegations, Meghan replied firmly. They're facts, my lived experience, and I'm tired of people acting like I need to prove my pain was valid enough to warrant speaking about it. Joy pursed her lips, and you could see her mind working. Okay, but Meghan, you have to understand. When you make claims like that, people are going to question them. That's journalism. That's accountability. Meghan's laugh was short and sharp. Accountability? Joy. Where was the accountability when tabloids published literal lies about me? Where was the journalism when they ran stories based on unnamed sources and palace insiders who didn't exist? I'm all for accountability, but it has to go both ways. Joy shifted in her seat, and there was something almost grudging in her expression, like she respected the fight even if she disagreed with the position. All right, fair point about the tabloids. They're garbage. We all know that. But you can't act like every criticism of you is coming from a place of malice or racism. Sometimes people just disagree with your choices. And sometimes Meghan countered immediately. People hide their prejudice behind the word criticism. I'm not saying every person who disagrees with me is racist. That would be absurd. But I am saying that the vitriol, the obsession, the double standards I've faced compared to other members of that family, there's a reason for it. And we all know what that reason is, even if some people are uncomfortable saying it out loud. Joy leaned forward, her voice rising slightly. See? This is what frustrates people, Meghan. You're implying that anyone who criticizes you is either racist or complicit in racism. That shuts down legitimate conversation. No, Meghan said, her voice firm and clear. What shuts down legitimate conversation is pretending that race isn't a factor when it clearly is. I can hold two thoughts at the same time, Joy. I can acknowledge that some criticism is valid and also recognize that some of it is rooted in something uglier. Why is that so hard for people to accept? Sunny jumped in, her voice supportive. I think what Meghan is saying is that we can't have an honest conversation about her experience without acknowledging the racial dynamics at play. That doesn't mean race is the only factor, but it's certainly one of them. Joy turned to Sunny. Of course race is a factor, I'm not denying that. But Meghan, you've also made choices that would be controversial regardless of your race. Moving to California, the interviews, the way you've talked about the royal family publicly, those choices have consequences. Consequences, Meghan repeated, and there was something dangerous in her calm. Joy, what consequences exactly do you think I should face for speaking my truth? What punishment is appropriate for a woman who refuses to stay silent about her mistreatment? I'm not talking about punishment, Joy said, her frustration showing. I'm talking about public opinion. When you put yourself out there, people are going to have opinions. That's reality. And when those opinions include death threats against my children? Meghan's voice cracked slightly, the first sign of real emotion breaking through her composure. When those opinions include racist harassment, lies that endanger my family's safety, coordinated campaigns to destroy my reputation, at what point does public opinion cross the line into something more sinister? The studio was absolutely silent. Even Joy seemed momentarily taken aback. Meghan continued, her voice steady again but carrying weight. You want to talk about reality? Here's reality. I have a security team because there are credible threats against my family. My children can't play in the park without armed guards. I can't go to the grocery store. I can't take my kids to school. I can't live anything resembling a normal life. Not because I don't want privacy, but because the hate that's been directed at me has real, dangerous consequences. So forgive me, Joy, if I don't think that's just the price of fame. Joy was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her tone was slightly softer. I'm sorry you've experienced threats. That's unacceptable, full stop. No one deserves that. But Meghan, you have to see how from the outside, it looks like you want to be both in the spotlight and protected from it. You want the platform, but not the scrutiny. I want, Meghan said, each word deliberate, to be treated like a human being. Is that really too much to ask? Can I not use my voice for good without being told I'm attention-seeking? Can I not protect my family without being called hypocritical? Can I not exist as a biracial woman married to a prince without being either worshipped or destroyed with no middle ground? Sarah spoke up, her voice gentle but probing. Meghan, I think what resonates with a lot of people is the feeling that you had opportunities many would dream of, and you walked away. Can you understand why that might be hard for some people to sympathize with? Meghan turned to Sarah, and her expression softened slightly. Sarah, I do understand that. I really do. And if I'm being completely honest, there are days I question that decision myself. Not because I think it was wrong, but because leaving something you once hoped would work out is painful. But here's what I need people to understand. That opportunity you're talking about came with a price tag, and that price was my mental health, my safety, my autonomy, and potentially my son's well-being. So yes, I walked away from a palace, but I walked toward my family's future, and I'd make that choice every single time. Joy wasn't letting it go. But you're still using your royal connection. The title, the association. You didn't walk away from that part. Meghan's eyes flashed again. Joy. That title is my husband's name. It's part of who he is. Should he pretend he wasn't born a prince? Should I pretend I wasn't married into that family? The whole point is that we're trying to define what that means on our own terms, not on terms dictated by an institution that didn't protect us. Some would call that having your cake and eating it too, Joy pressed. And I would call that living my life, Meghan shot back. Joy, do you regret any part of your career? Have you ever taken a job and then realized it wasn't what you thought it would be? Have you ever left a situation that looked perfect on paper but was destroying you from the inside? Joy paused, and for a moment, something shifted in her expression. Of course I have. Everyone has. Exactly, Meghan said. So why am I held to a different standard? Why is my decision to leave scrutinized and picked apart when we celebrate other people for having the courage to walk away from toxic situations? Is it because I'm supposed to be grateful? Is it because people think I didn't suffer enough to earn the right to leave? Maybe, Joy said, and there was a new honesty in her voice. Maybe it's because your story is so public. Because millions of little girls dreamed of being a princess, and you got to be one, and then you said it wasn't worth it? That shatters the fairy tale. Meghan leaned back, and a sad smile crossed her face. Good. The fairy tale needed to be shattered, because that's all it was, Joy. A fairy tale. A fantasy that had nothing to do with the reality of what that life actually entailed. And if my story helps even one person understand that glitter and tiaras don't equal happiness, that duty and tradition don't have to mean suffering and silence, then maybe all of this will have been worth something. Whoopi finally managed to get a word in. I think what you're both dancing around is the question of whether Meghan has the right to define her own narrative or whether the public gets to decide what her story means. Exactly, Meghan said, turning to Whoopi gratefully. And I'm here to say that I get to define my own narrative. Not the tabloids, not the palace, not even well-meaning talk show hosts. Me. My story belongs to me. Joy wasn't done, but Meghan, when you make yourself a public figure, when you do interviews and documentaries, you're inviting people into your story. You can't then be upset when they form their own opinions about it. I'm not upset that people have opinions, Meghan said, and her patience was clearly wearing thin. I'm upset that those opinions are often based on lies, half-truths, and racist stereotypes. I'm upset that the bar for me is different than the bar for others. I'm upset that when I speak up, I'm divisive. But when I stay quiet, I'm complicit. There's no winning, Joy. And that's intentional. Intentional by who? Joy challenged. By a system, Meghan said, her voice rising with passion, that benefits from tearing down women, especially women of color, who refuse to play by the rules. By a media ecosystem that makes money off controversy and conflict. By people who are so invested in the fairy tale that they'll attack anyone who dares to tell the truth about it. Joy shook her head. I think you're giving people too little credit. Most people can think for themselves. They don't need the media to tell them what to think about you. Really? Meghan's tone was sharp now, almost mocking. So all those people who believed I made Catherine cry before my wedding, even though the opposite was true, they came to that conclusion on their own? All the people who think I'm manipulative and calculating because that's how I was portrayed, that's their independent thought? The Catherine thing, Joy said, seizing on it. You addressed that in your interview. She apologized. You moved on. Why are you still bringing it up? Because it's an example, Meghan said, her voice tight with frustration. An example of how one lie, one planted story, becomes truth in the public mind. And correcting it doesn't matter, because the damage is already done. The narrative is set. I'm the villain who made the beloved princess cry. Never mind that it wasn't true. Joy spread her hands. Okay, so what's the solution? How do you fix it? I keep telling the truth, Meghan said simply. I keep showing up. I keep doing the work. And eventually, hopefully, people will see past the noise and recognize that I'm just a person, trying to live with dignity and raise my family in peace. Joy looked at Meghan for a long moment, and something in her expression shifted. You're very good at this. I'll give you that. Very good at flipping the conversation, making yourself the reasonable one, and everyone else the problem. Meghan's eyebrows rose. That's what you took from what I just said? That I'm being manipulative? I'm saying you're skilled at presenting your side, Joy clarified. But Meghan, there are two sides to every story. We haven't heard from the palace, from the family. They've stayed mostly silent. By choice, Meghan said immediately. They could speak. They could correct the lies. They could defend me when the press attacks me. But they don't, Joy. Their silence is a choice, and it speaks volumes. Joy leaned forward, her voice taking on a harder edge. Or maybe they're choosing dignity over drama. The word drama landed like a slap, and you could see Meghan's entire body tense. When she spoke, her voice was low and controlled, but there was steel beneath it. Dignity over drama. Tell me, Joy, when women speak up about mistreatment, when we refuse to accept unacceptable behavior, why is it always called drama? Why is standing up for yourself considered undignified? That's not what I meant, Joy started, but Meghan cut her off. Isn't it, though? That's the subtext of everything you've said today, that I should have stayed quiet, that speaking out makes me difficult, makes me the problem. Do you know how many women, how many people of color, have been silenced by that exact logic? Joy's voice rose. I'm not trying to silence you, but I'm also not going to pretend your version of events is the only truth. Then invite them on, Meghan challenged, her eyes blazing. Invite them to explain why they thought it was acceptable to question my son's skin color. Invite them to explain why I was denied security when there were credible threats. But they won't come. They'll hide behind protocol and never answer for any of it. At what point do you stop being the victim? Joy pressed. Meghan's laugh was bitter. I have never asked anyone to see me as a victim. What I've asked for is understanding. But every time I speak about what happened, it gets reduced to me playing the victim card. Joy studied her carefully. Give me an example where you think race was the primary factor. Meghan's voice was measured but powerful. When similar stories were written about Catherine and about me, the headlines were completely different. When she touched her baby bump, she was maternal. When I did, I was vain and attention-seeking. Same action, completely different framing. That's not coincidence, Joy. That's racism. Joy nodded slowly. But Meghan, do you have any regrets about leaving? About the interviews? Meghan was quiet for a moment. I regret that it came to that point. I regret that my children will grow up knowing their family is fractured. But do I regret speaking my truth? Do I regret choosing my family's well-being? No, Joy. I don't regret that for a second. Even knowing the backlash? Even knowing all of that. Because the alternative was losing myself completely. Joy wasn't letting it go. But you have to admit, there's irony in you talking about struggle while sitting here after signing multi-million-dollar deals. The steel was back in Meghan's voice instantly. Joy, are you really going to tell me that my pain matters less because I have money? That's the same logic used to dismiss every successful person of color who speaks out. We're told we should be grateful, that we have no right to complain. It's silencing dressed up as practicality. Then understand this, Meghan continued, her voice steady and final. I am not perfect. I have made mistakes. But my imperfection doesn't negate my experience. My privilege doesn't erase my pain. And my decision to speak out doesn't make me an attention seeker. It makes me a woman who refused to disappear quietly. And if that makes me controversial, then so be it. I'd rather be all of those things than silent. The studio erupted in applause. Joy looked at Meghan with an expression that was part respect, part frustration. Whoopi stepped in. This has been one of the most honest conversations we've had on this show. Meghan nodded. Thank you for having me. And Joy, thank you for pushing back. These conversations aren't easy, but they're necessary. Joy gave a slight smile. You're tougher than I expected. I've had to be, Meghan replied simply. So there you have it. One of the most intense confrontations in talk show history. Meghan Markle refusing to back down against Joy Behar's relentless questioning. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What did you think of this exchange? Did Meghan handle it well, or did she go too far? Let me know your thoughts.